I was standing on my own street in broad daylight when Karen decided to make an example out of me. She didn't whisper. She didn't hesitate. She performed. Her voice cut to the neighborhood as she barked orders, waving her hands like claws, shouting about authority, compliance, and consequences. Behind her smile was something darker: enjoyment, control. 40 acres of neighbors froze as she laughed and declared, "This is what happens when people forget who runs things." What Karen didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that I audit regulatory compliance for a living. And the moment she abused her HOA power in America, she set something in motion that would dismantle her piece by piece. I am Daniel Johnson. I am 45 years old, and for the last 18 years, my profession has been simple to explain but dangerous to underestimate. I am a senior compliance auditor. I specialize in tracing authority, where it begins, where it ends, and who quietly steps beyond it. I live in a quiet American suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood that prides itself on trim hedges, neutral paint colors, and a belief that order equals safety. Homeowners wave politely. HOA newsletters arrive on time, and most disputes never rise above passive-aggressive emails. That illusion is why people like Karen thrive here. Karen was in her early 50s, the sitting HOA president, and she carried herself like someone who believed the neighborhood existed because she allowed it to. Short blonde hair that never quite stayed in place, eyes always calculating, lips trained into a smile that vanished the moment she wasn't being watched. She didn't yell all the time, only when she wanted an audience. The first time I truly noticed her wasn't during a meeting. It was on a Tuesday morning as I walked my trash bin back up the driveway. Karen stood across the street, clipboard in hand, loudly instructing a contractor to photograph a neighbor's fence. She laughed while doing it. Not a friendly laugh, a satisfied one. "That's another violation," she announced, her voice carrying. "Make sure it's documented. I want consequences." I watch quietly. That is what I do. When you audit systems, you learn patience. You learn that people reveal more when they believe you're harmless. A week later, Karen turned her attention to me. It started with a notice taped to my front door, an alleged violation regarding exterior modifications that didn't exist. Then a fine, then a threat of enforcement action if I failed to comply immediately. Karen delivered it personally, standing on my porch like a judge, her smile tight, eyes sharp. "You people always think rules don't apply to you," she said loudly, making sure nearby neighbors could hear. "This neighborhood doesn't run itself." I remember that moment clearly, the way she enjoyed it, the way she leaned in slightly, as if daring me to challenge her. What Karen didn't know, what she never asked, was that I had spent my career dismantling organizations far more powerful than a suburban HOA. That evening, I sat at my dining table, laptop open, the violation notice beside me. I didn't argue. I didn't call. I didn't complain. I started reading. HOA bylaws, county zoning records, state compliance statutes, insurance filings, public disclosures. Patterns began to form quickly. Sloppy record-keeping, unauthorized enforcement actions, selective penalties. Karen hadn't just been loud, she had been careless. Over the next few days, neighbors began to approach me quietly. One mentioned a lien threatened over a disputed fee. Another whispered about a fine issued without a hearing. Phones came out. Screens were tilted. Evidence surfaced. Karen, meanwhile, grew bolder. At the next HOA walkthrough, she raised her voice deliberately, pointing, laughing, announcing citations like trophies. "This is what leadership looks like," she declared. I saw phones recording her from across the street. She didn't notice. Or worse, she didn't care. What Karen felt was untouchable. What she didn't realize was that abuse of authority leaves a trail. And in America, trails lead somewhere. I hadn't confronted her yet. I hadn't warned her. I was still letting her believe exactly what she wanted to believe, that I was just another homeowner. Once you worked in compliance long enough, you stop looking at people and start looking at patterns. Individuals lie. Systems rarely do. The morning after Karen's latest public walkthrough, I requested HOA records the way any homeowner is legally allowed to. Nothing confrontational. Nothing dramatic. Just a formal, written request dated, polite, and precise. The kind of request that makes careless administrators nervous. The response came back late and incomplete. That alone told me more than Karen ever could. Over the next several days, I noticed something else. Enforcement only moved in one direction. Same houses, same families, same streets. Fines issued quickly. Appeals delayed indefinitely. Meanwhile, other violations, larger ones, went untouched. Oversized structures, unapproved modifications, selective blindness. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was exercising control. I began building a timeline. Each notice, each fine, each public outburst, each moment Karen made sure people were watching. The behavior followed a familiar arc, confidence fueled by silence. The kind of silence she mistook for submission. Neighbors started talking to me more openly now. Not loudly, not in groups. Quiet conversations at mailboxes. Brief pauses during evening walks. She threatened to lean our house, one man said, eyes darting toward the street. She fined us twice without a hearing, a woman whispered. She told me. You should have stayed on her good side, another neighbor admitted, embarrassed. Karen, meanwhile, grew theatrical. At an HOA meeting held in the community clubhouse, she stood at the front like a prosecutor, voice raised, fingers tapping the podium. She mocked complaints, dismissed questions, smiled when people flinched. This board will not be challenged, she said sharply. If you don't like it, there are plenty of other neighborhoods. People shifted uncomfortably. Phones came out again. I didn't speak. I took notes. Later that night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by printed bylaws and highlighted statutes. HOA authority in America is specific, limited, and conditional. Karen was operating as if it were absolute. That's when I found it. A clause buried in the HOA's governing documents, never updated, never revised, requiring external compliance review if enforcement actions exceeded a certain threshold within a calendar year. Karen had crossed it months ago. Worse, the HOA's insurance coverage depended on adherence to that clause. I smiled for the first time. The next step wasn't confrontation. It was education. I drafted a neutral summary. No accusations. No emotion. Just facts. Citations. Dates. Language lifted directly from statutes. I sent it quietly to the board members, to the property manager, to the insurer's public contact address. Karen didn't notice right away. She was too busy enjoying herself. 2 days later, she confronted a neighbor in broad daylight, voice raised, hands slicing the air. I don't need permission, she snapped. I am the authority here. Someone recorded it from across the street. By the end of the week, the HOA board requested an emergency session. Closed door. Karen walked in confident. She walked out pale. She still didn't look at me, but she started avoiding eye contact with everyone else. The neighborhood felt different now. Quieter. Alert. People weren't afraid anymore. They were curious. Karen had built her power on intimidation. She didn't realize the foundation had already begun to erode, and she had no idea how far the consequences would travel once the paperwork caught up to her. Karen noticed a change before she admitted it to herself. It showed in small things at first. The way conversation stopped when she entered space. The way people no longer nodded politely when she passed. The way phones didn't go away anymore. They stayed out, screens angled, recording quietly. Power depends on belief. And belief, once shaken, never fully recovers. The emergency HOA board meeting had rattled her more than she let on. I knew because 2 board members contacted me separately the next morning, both careful, both nervous. She's demanding to know who contacted the insurer. One said, she thinks someone's sabotaging her. The other whispered, they weren't wrong. They just misunderstood the method. Karen responded the only way she knew how, escalation through intimidation. Within days, new violation notices appeared. Faster, harsher, less justified. Warnings became threats. Courtesy vanished entirely. She confronted people in driveways, in front yards, even at the local coffee shop near the subdivision entrance. I witnessed one of them firsthand. Karen stood inches from a homeowner, voice sharp, finger pointed like a weapon. "You don't get to question me," she snapped. "I've been doing this longer than any of you." Someone laughed nervously from behind a parked car. Someone else filmed openly. Karen turned and saw the phones. Her face changed. The smile didn't vanish. It hardened. That night, I received an email sent to the entire HOA mailing list. Karen's tone was defensive now, legalistic, filled with half-understood terminology and veiled threats. She cited authority without references, power without foundation. That's when the neighborhood crossed a line together. A retired accountant offered financial records he'd kept from his time on a previous board. A contractor shared emails showing selective enforcement. A young couple forwarded audio recordings of Karen threatening liens without hearings. No coordination, no planning, just collective realization. I compiled nothing yet. I advised nothing. I simply listened. Karen, meanwhile, unraveled publicly. At the next HOA walkthrough, she shouted again, louder this time, hands raised, gestures sharp and erratic. "This neighborhood is out of control," she yelled, "and I won't tolerate disrespect." But her voice cracked near the end. That's when she finally confronted me directly. "You think you're smart," she said, standing in the street, eyes narrowed. "You think paperwork scares me?" I met her gaze calmly. "I don't think about you at all," I replied. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Neighbors stared. Karen flushed. For the first time, she had no audience, only witnesses. That night, a certified letter arrived at my door. Karen accused me of harassment, interference, and undermining HOA authority. The accusations were vague, the legal grounding non-existent. It was desperation in an envelope. I responded the next morning, briefly, formally, and with one attachment. A request for records under state statute, citing specific compliance thresholds, sent not just to Karen, but to the board, the property management firm, and the HOA's insurer. Karen called an emergency meeting that same afternoon. She arrived late. Her confidence was gone. What she didn't know yet, what she still couldn't see, was that the neighborhood had already stopped fearing her. And once fear disappears, authority collapses quickly. The emergency meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening, just after sunset. Karen insisted it be held in person. She always did better when she could dominate a room. This time, the room didn't belong to her. The community clubhouse filled early, not with chatter, but with purpose. People arrived carrying folders, envelopes, phones already recording. Couples sat together. Board members avoided eye contact. The property manager looked like someone who regretted taking the contract. Karen entered 10 minutes late. She wore confidence like armor. Chin high, shoulders squared, but the performance cracked the moment she saw the turnout. This wasn't a meeting. It was a reckoning. She opened with procedure, motions, reminders of authority. The words landed flat. No applause, no nods. The first question came from a retired teacher in the second row. Calm, precise, about selective enforcement. Karen deflected. The second question came from a contractor she'd threatened months earlier, about undocumented penalties. Karen snapped. Then a board member spoke quietly, asked about insurance exposure, about compliance thresholds. Karen froze. I watched her realize in real time that she was no longer steering the conversation. People didn't shout. They didn't insult her. That was the most devastating part. They asked questions she couldn't answer. They cited documents. They quoted bylaws. Karen tried intimidation. "This meeting is adjourned," she barked. No one moved. That's when the property manager stood and said the words Karen feared most. "We need to pause enforcement until compliance review is complete." The room exhaled. Karen laughed, sharp and hollow. "You're all overreacting," she said. "This is just noise." But her hands shook. After the meeting, people gathered in small groups. Plans formed naturally. A temporary committee. A shared document drive. A timeline. I didn't lead it. I didn't need to. Karen stormed out alone. 2 days later, she resigned as HOA president. Temporarily. according to her email. The board accepted immediately. The insurer responded the following week. They were not amused. Karen still believed this was a misunderstanding, a phase, something she could outlast. She was wrong, because once institutions get involved, ego stops mattering, and Karen had left a very clean paper trail. Karen thought stepping down would buy her time. She believed silence would make the problem fade. That was her final miscalculation. The insurer's response arrived quietly, without drama or threats. Just a letter, formal, clinical, devastating. They cited material noncompliance, unauthorized enforcement activity, and exposure to civil liability. Coverage was suspended pending review. That single decision froze everything. No fines, no liens, no enforcement letters. Karen's weapon, authority, had been neutralized by process. The board panicked. Emails flew. Emergency calls were made. Lawyers were consulted. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Karen began calling people directly. Former allies, past supporters, anyone who might still answer. Most didn't. I received my first official notice that week, not from the HOA, but from their legal counsel. A request for cooperation, a request for documentation, a request for clarity. I gave them exactly that. Meanwhile, the neighborhood changed tone entirely. People smiled again. Conversations happened openly. The fear that once kept doors closed evaporated. Karen reappeared at a board meeting 2 weeks later, no longer president, but still defiant. She interrupted discussions, corrected people loudly, rolled her eyes when legal language was mentioned. Then the attorney spoke. He explained calmly that personal liability was now a possibility, that actions taken outside scope were no longer shielded by the HOA, that recordings, emails, and notices could be introduced if litigation followed. Karen laughed at first. Then she stopped, her face drained of color as the words settled. She asked if this was just a warning. The attorney didn't answer. Outside the meeting, neighbors gathered, not to celebrate, but to watch. Karen walked past them stiffly, eyes forward, jaw clenched. Phone stayed down this time. No one needed to record it. The next letter arrived a week later. Certified, addressed directly to Karen. She had been named individually in a civil filing. Misuse of authority, selective enforcement, emotional distress. The HOA was no longer the shield. That night, Karen sat alone in her house while the neighborhood lights flicked on one by one around her. Power had isolated her. Paperwork had finished the job. And the court date was already set. Courtrooms have a sound long before anyone speaks. It is the quiet of authority. Paper shifting, shoes on polished floors. The restrained call for people who know they're being judged simply by standing there. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to see who would show up. Karen arrived late. She wore a sharp blazer, bright, deliberate, defiant. Her short blonde hair was styled more carefully than usual, as if discipline could be manufactured for a day. She carried herself stiffly, chin high, eyes scanning the room like it still belonged to her. It didn't. This wasn't an HOA meeting. This wasn't her neighborhood clubhouse. This was an American courtroom. Neighbors filled the benches behind me. Some I knew well. Others I only recognized from driveways and mailboxes. They weren't loud. They didn't whisper. They simply watched. Karen noticed them. For the first time, there was no one to order around. When the judge entered, the room rose as one. Karen stood a half-second late. The case moved quickly. Emails were entered into record. Audio recordings followed. Official notices, and signed unauthorized, were displayed on a screen large enough for everyone to see. Karen's attorney objected often. The judge overruled calmly. Then my name was called. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked to the podium. I spoke plainly about my profession, about compliance, about authority and its limits. I explained how rules exist to protect communities, not terrorize them. How Karen's actions weren't aggressive enforcement, but deliberate abuse. How she targeted selectively, punished publicly, and operated without procedural backing. The judge asked questions. Karen avoided eye contact. Then came the moment that shifted the room. The judge addressed Karen directly. He asked why she continued issuing penalties after receiving formal warnings, why she bypassed legal counsel, why she ignored insurance notices, why she believed her authority exceeded the law. Karen answered loudly at first, then defensively, then poorly. She blamed stress, volunteers, misunderstandings. The judge stopped her. Authority, he said evenly, does not excuse misconduct. The ruling was clear. Karen was found personally liable for damages. The HOA was ordered into oversight. All enforcement actions issued under her presidency were suspended pending review. But the final blow wasn't legal. It was human. As Karen gathered her things, cameras waited outside. Local news vans lined the curb. Reporters asked questions she couldn't control. Neighbors walked past her, calm, composed, dignified. No one shouted. No one laughed. Silence did the work. Karen paused on the courthouse steps. She looked out at the crowd, the same people she once ruled through fear. And for the first time, she understood something too late. Power doesn't vanish loudly. It dissolves in front of witnesses. I walked away without looking back. The system had spoken, and America was listening. Power does not disappear overnight. It erodes. Weeks after the ruling, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder, not celebratory, but lighter. Notices stopped appearing on doors. Threatening letters vanished. Meetings became discussions instead of trials. Oversight arrived exactly as ordered. Independent auditors. External legal counsel. Open financial reviews. The HOA was stripped down to what it should have been all along, a service body, not a throne. Karen was not present. She resigned quietly. No farewell message. No apology letter. Just a short filing. Accepted without ceremony. I saw her once after that. Not in court. Not at a meeting. At a grocery store on a weekday afternoon. She stood in line ahead of me. No blazer this time. Just a simple jacket, hair unstyled, posture smaller. No one approached her. No one confronted her. The neighborhood didn't need to. She noticed me in the reflection of the freezer door. For a moment, I thought she might say something. She didn't. She paid, picked up her bag, and walked out alone. That was her sentence. Not the fines, not the rulings, but the absence of authority she once mistook for respect. Months later, the neighborhood elected a new board. Policies were rewritten. Transparency became mandatory. Enforcement required consensus. Fear was replaced with procedure. And me? I went back to my work. Auditing systems. Ensuring compliance. Protecting communities from people who confuse control with leadership. Sometimes I'm asked if I enjoyed it. Bringing down an HOA president. I never answer yes. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reminding one person and everyone watching that power borrowed from trust collapses when abused. And in America, eventually it always does. What happened here wasn't about rules or paperwork. It was about power and what happens when someone believes they are untouchable. This neighborhood didn't fight back with anger. It fought back with truth, patience, and the system that protects us all when used correctly. If this story reminded you that accountability still matters, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who believes in fairness, and subscribe to the channel for more real HOA stories that expose abuse, ego, and justice, one community at a time.